to Ashes Community Roundup, the show where we take a look at all the community happenings for the past month and see what's being said about the various topics surrounding Ashes of Creation. I'm Wandering Mist.
And I'm Maezriel.
And we have a list of things to do today. So, on the agenda for today, tell you what, Maze, do you want to tell us what you've got on the agenda for us?
Yeah, of course. So we've got that MassivelyOP poll where they put out the award for the most anticipated MMO of 2020. And of course, the Mage skill preview video where we got to see firsthand a few of the skills being used for the Mage class.
Nice. And on top of that, we have this month's dev discussion, which was on boss fights and the developer live stream that happened just before Christmas time. So without further ado, let's dive in.
So for anybody that was around the forums, around the subreddit, or around the Discord, a few weeks back, they would have seen a post saying that we're about 100 votes away from being the top of this poll. And by the end of it, for about the 25-ish games that were on it, I want to say Ashes was in the 40s, took 43% of the votes, overwhelmingly won. Now, whereas that sounds very exciting, the community as a whole is very excited, I would take that with a grain of salt. A few people did point out Intrepid's probably the only developer that actually even posted about it, as many of these were much smaller developers. There were other games such as Hightail, and I would say there was probably one, Core Punk was another one, where nobody really knows much of them unless you're already part of those communities. I will say one thing that kind of was weird about the post, and some others have pointed out, there was a lot of excitement from the writers about not New World, of course New World, but about Crimson Desert.
Yes.
A lot of people are still calling that an MMO. I could have sworn the devs came out and said that was more of an action adventure with multiplayer aspects. Did I misread that?
Yeah, no, the devs absolutely came out and said that. And there's a couple of other ones in there as well. Like there was the Little Book of Travels game, which again the devs have come out and said that is not an MMORPG.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was some questionable choices on that particular poll, but anyway, yeah. So what was the result?
Yeah, so yeah, we were at 43%. We had a little over 2,300 votes, whereas the next highest didn't even break 1,000. Like I said, I would take those numbers with a very healthy dose of salt, because Intrepid did ask us to go vote, and I don't think very many other communities did. Whereas the writers, and it might have just been where they were already in the middle of writing the article when the devs came out with the news, but there is a lot of excitement for New World still. I know personally, and for a lot of Ashes, the beta didn't really smack with New World. It didn't really click with a lot of us, but I don't think that means it's a bad game. I think a lot of people are still excited for it. So we're obviously excited for Ashes. I don't think we can say the community, the MMO community as a whole, is excited, as some people are still waiting, because which is valid. There's not a whole lot to see with AOC just yet.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Cool, but that poll's still going. I believe they haven't closed it, so if you do want to contribute to that poll, if you haven't already, or just have a look and see what's there will be links to that in the description below. All right, what else have you got for us, Maze?
Of course. So the next big one was the Mage Preview, where we saw some of the level 1 through 10 active skills. And if you've seen any of the previous live cast or previews, you're not going to be surprised by many of the comments here, it's very acrobatic. For me personally, I can see where a lot of people come from. So I come from World of Warcraft, where the animations are very rooted, they're very grounded, with the one exception being Demon Hunter, and to a lesser extent Monk. You're pretty much stationary, and everything feels very heavy. Whereas in Ashes, you're about as light as a feather, and it is a thing where a lot of people have asked, why? And it's definitely constantly brought up. A lot of it should be especially with level 1 skills, casting a fireball probably doesn't require a pirouette. Probably don't need to flip.
Yes.
But yet here we are. Now, that being said, There are games that do combat like this and do it fairly well. Final Fantasy and BDO, both big examples of fairly over-the-top animations for even basic abilities. But I'm curious if the disconnect here is like, if that's the direction AOC wants to take it, if Intrepid wants to take it that way, if they've not communicated that clearly, that that's the combat style that they're looking for, like aesthetically, that's the style that they're looking to fit with a hybrid system, is something closer to Final Fantasy BDO and not something far more grounded. Whereas I think a lot of people coming into Ashes are very excited for like the political intrigue and the player versus player aspect, or might be thinking something closer to Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings than Final Fantasy.
For sure. And on that point, this wasn't actually on the Mage skills video. It was actually on a different video, but this comment is just so relevant, and I think it speaks to a lot of people. It's quite well upvoted, from OSG Project, and he says, when all abilities look special, none of them look special. And I definitely, that one. Yeah, I think that definitely applies to some of the mage animations that we've seen so far. Because you've got to be able to escalate, right? You start off, usually in sort of an RPG, you start off with a very basic spell, and then as you go as your skill increases, as you get higher leveled, you get sort of these more grand spells that like really look amazing on screen. If you already start like at level 1, if you start with such an amazing looking ability or such a powerful looking ability, then there's really no way to escalate it. So we'll see what Intrepid decide to do about that.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm curious to see it. What's your opinion? Like, well, are you excited to see a castle siege where the whole battle looks like a Cirque du Soleil show?
Oh god. You know what? I would like to see it more than I'd like to play it. To play it, it'd be a complete nightmare. But to just watch it and experience it, I think would be a blast. At least in the beginning.
I know we'll definitely have some examples flash in for the video, and I wish I could pull some specifics, but overwhelmingly, most of the comments seem to be asking for something a bit more grounded. And I think, as much as they would probably hate to admit it, something closer to World of Warcraft's animations than BDO. I didn't play a lot of Arcade, so I'm not sure how they worked animation-wise, but I haven't seen too many people that are super excited for something quite so flashy.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next topic was on this month's dev discussion, which was on boss difficulty. The developers asked, do you enjoy gatekeeper bosses, which is a boss that is very difficult right at the start of the dungeon, followed by a few easier bosses? Or do you prefer linear difficulty in boss difficulty? So you start off with the first boss being the easiest, and then they get gradually harder and harder and harder. There's been quite a mixture of responses for this. Most people agreed that the final boss should be the hardest regardless of the linearity of it, and yeah, that makes perfect sense. Some people liked the variable difficulty because it keeps things interesting, but then others prefer linear difficulty because then you have a better sense of progression throughout the raid or the dungeon. I don't know, what are your thoughts, Maze?
So for me, I'm coming again World of Warcraft, and where I do mythic raiding, and I prefer the bosses to be fairly linear. If there's an option in the dungeon where you can pick between a few different bosses, they can be different and definitely like present different challenges, but overall difficulty wise, let it be linear, because I agree. You like that feeling. I don't know too many gamers who don't like feeling a consistent sense of progression, and rather than, oh, okay, we killed this boss, everything from here is just downhill. I don't know too many people who like that feeling.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
There's been comments that have reflected that on this thread, so I'm going to read out a few here. This first comment comes from Bot. He says, I prefer linear progression for bosses. It feels better seeing how far you can go and getting over the hump than being entirely blocked out of content. it gives you something to strive for and also allows you to gain a certain level of understanding for your power level. But then, of course, you've got the other side of it. So people who like the gatekeeper bosses, got a couple of things here. So this comment comes from Sinjin. He says, I like to be kept on my toes, so I don't mind a difficult encounter in the beginning, mid, or towards the end of a dungeon. Whether it's a super mob or even a puzzle, it's always fun to keep things interesting. And another comment from Reduct, he says, I prefer a harder boss at the start. A good gear/skill check sets the scene for the rest of the instance. I find that if the first few bosses are too easy, raiders tend to fall asleep or stop paying attention. A difficult first boss keeps them engaged and tentative. What do you think about that as somebody who raids a lot, Maze?
So it depends. It depends on how you clarify that difficulty. So Sathrago had an excellent comment on it. The first boss in a dungeon, if they're supposed to be the first line of defense, should be more of a DPS check than anything, IMO. It sets a standard of the raid, and you can get fancy with mechanics and special effects with the rest of the bosses. If you can't beat the boss before the white mechanic hits, then you should go back out in the world, gear up, improve your rotations, which creates a tier that players have to reach in order to progress throughout the dungeon. Now, I know for the current Shadowlands tier in World of Warcraft, it is pretty much a DPS check. Shriekwing is a giant bat that comes down. Now, he does have some fun mechanics. It's mostly just dodging puddles of blood and trying not to drop puddles of blood on top of your party. It's fairly basic for World of Warcraft raiding, but it makes sure that 1, you are awake, but 2, you're capable of just wailing on him. Because if you can't pass that DPS check, you're not going to pass the ones later down. And then after about 4 or 5 bosses, you get to Sludge Fist, who is just nothing but a DPS check. So whereas Shriekwing, if you're super smart with the blood puddles, you can still pass him just by out-surviving things. Sludge Fist is a hard DPS check. If you do not kill him in under 6 minutes, you're going to wipe. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You will wipe. And that he has a mechanic locked in for that. After killing him, that's when you move on to the last 2 bosses, who are your hardest bosses. So I do think an ebb and flow can come from that, but you know, Shriekwing, it was a far easier, like most people were clearing him first, if not second week. Sludge Fist bricked some people for a little bit, even on the heroic difficulty. So you can definitely have big spikes, but you still want it to feel progressive as you go along. I think you can have both.
Yeah, agreed. I do find it interesting that the community seems so split on that. I wasn't expecting it to. I thought linearity would sort of win out the day that. But it's very interesting to see people's comments on it, so that's really cool, and that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we're making this video, to see what the community has to say about these topics. The last topic is the developer live stream, which was on the 22nd of December. This was quite cool, not gonna lie. It was a blast to watch and be a part of. If you haven't watched it, I fully recommend that you do. Again, links will be down in the description. But so Margaret wasn't there because she was already on holiday for Christmas time, which meant that Stephen was running the show. And Stephen, bless his heart, he's a great guy, but he's not very good when it comes to streaming. So there was some issues with it, some poor transitions. He forgot to format the boss fight before the stream, so that caused some delays. But you know what? The chat had a good laugh. Everyone was enjoying it, and it was just a good time. So even he's our little goofball when it comes to streaming, and we love him for it. So during the stream, they had their usual developer update in terms of what the studio is and the design. They talked about the recent pre-alpha test a little bit, so that's all good. They did also say that, I didn't even realize this, but apparently people had complained about the dwarfs, the Denier, that they weren't beefy enough. So he did say that feedback had been heard, and they will be making beefier dwarf models for people. So that should be interesting to see when that comes out. And they also talked about the combat rework that is coming. So what we've seen so far is very much a first pass. They are reworking the combat, so that should be happening at some point between now and Alpha 1. So we'll look out for that and see how that goes. And then they showed off a boss fight, which was, again, great fun. They decided, I don't quite know why, but they decided to take on a 40-man raid boss with 7 players, using various GM hacks along the way. As you can imagine, shenanigans ensued. I'm not going to spoil what happens, just to know that it was a ton of fun to watch. The chat loved it, everybody loved it. It was great fun. There were memes aplenty for it, so definitely well worth checking that out. Of course, during the whole thing, lots of love for the environments and the mounts, because they were on show, and it shows with the YouTube reactions. So currently, as of recording this video, the YouTube reactions for the boss fight video, you've got 5,500 upvotes to 200 downvotes and over 200,000 views, so clearly it's doing well. Comments across the boards, lots of comments for how pretty the game looks, obviously. Also a lot of comments praising the improvements of the combat. I wasn't aware that they had done much with the combat between that gameplay video and the last one they put out, but maybe people have seen something that I haven't. I don't know, it's really odd. But yeah, overall, very positive feedback on the boss fight, and yeah, it was rightly so. It was a ton of fun to watch. I don't know, Maze, did you watch it at all? Were you there during the live stream?
Yeah, I was. I watched. I didn't see anything overly new outside of like boss mechanics. And one of the first times we saw some boss mechanics, like them getting yeeted around the map. They definitely probably should have tried to use GM hacks to cut the boss's health by like 3/4. But for anybody who did watch it and they're like praising, if you didn't like the combat in that, and I know you and I just not even a few minutes ago were kind of harping on some like animations for classes. I remember in the combat video that they had released, because they released a separate, the 4K footage, Steven had made a comment, "Glorious Ashes Frans. We had an amazing testing weekend with thousands of our Alpha 1 testers. Wanted to show you guys some footage in the new zones and fighting some epic level 10 bosses. Please keep in mind this is early footage and we continue to improve and iterate, including combat revamp coming in March. Excited to keep showing you all our amazing progress. Hope you all enjoy and have an amazing holiday and New Year's, with love from Intrepid." Which is sweet. So if you don't like the combat right now, I know it's going to be going through a revamp up in here coming up soon in the next few months. So we have that to look forward to. So maybe all of these animations that we've all kind of just been crying about will get changed.
It's hard to tell. There's been, I get the feeling sometimes that Intrepid is sort of like flexing their muscles when it comes to the animation. Like they wanted to put out, like they wanted to just see at this early stage how batshit insane they can go with the animations, and they'll sort of later on down the line they'll tailor it back and make things more appropriate for the levels. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the combat rework. So yeah, that was the boss fight video, which again, ton of fun. Highly recommend. If you haven't seen it already, go and watch it. Links in the description. The final part of the dev live stream was the Q&A. The main thing with the Q&A, the main big topic that got brought up about that was, of course, the daily login rewards. Oh yes, so the question came up and Stephen immediately said that he was in favor of login rewards. And as you can imagine, the Twitch chat went mad and did a very resounding no, and also spawned a whole ton of forum threads from it. So yeah, the community made it very, very clear that they had no interest in the kinds of login rewards that you see from other games. And in one such forum thread, there was a wonderful post by one of the forum regulars, Noani. I love this comment that they put, and it really speaks to me on a number of levels. They said, no, 2 reasons. First, if logging into the game isn't reward enough, then the developer should just make the game better. Second, players shouldn't ever feel punished for taking a day off to take their significant other out to dinner or to spend an evening with their children. Someone that is able to spend 2 blocks of 7 hours per week should not be at any disadvantage to someone that is able to spend 7 blocks of 2 hours a week. 100% agree, honestly, yeah. And clearly a lot of other people do, because it has 32 likes on it, which is unheard of in the forums. So clearly a lot of people felt the same way.
Yeah, and I don't remember who made the comment, but I know someone did point out, like, why? Like, what would the metric be for, like, outside of, unless you wanted to say engagement, but what's the gain for login rewards? Because I know for me, if you want to have like some daily quests, however they want to integrate those into the game, that's fine, you know, just to help keep things a little interesting while when you're at the max level and you've completed all the quests. But a coin or a pat on the back just for logging in, I don't really feel the need. Like, there's many other things that we could do, like you being able to go check on plants. I know Steven has mentioned wanting to be able to have like herb gardens and stuff. That should encourage you enough to log in without having to go full Facebook gotcha games on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. The good thing about Intrepid that is, even though Stephen said that he was in favor of it, he saw the reactions in the chat, and at the end of the stream they said, yeah, we can see that a lot of people have opinions about this, so the dev discussion for January is going to be on login rewards, and they have done so. The login rewards dev discussion is up, including a poll, so again, link to that in the description. By all means, check that out, and we'll look at it next month when we do the next episode of Ashes Community Roundup. We're going to plan on doing this every month. For now though, I think that's enough for today. I hope you found this video enjoyable. Put a comment down below about what you thought about any of the topics that we have brought up today. Did you agree with our assessment? Did you disagree? We're curious to know your thoughts. Until then, have a fantastic day everybody, and we will see you next time.